Yeah, George.
John, you and I went over to your house the other day. We were talking about a variety of topics, one of them being the Tonopah Test Range, Area 52. And then we got into something else odd. And I want to introduce this. We got a couple of minutes before we take our bottom of the hour break. It's in a town called Hawthorne, Nevada. There's a big lake out there, Walker Lake, but we're a couple of 100 miles away from the ocean. And yet there on the side of the road is an odd sign. You know what sign I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah, it says the Naval Undersea Warfare Center.
Yeah, an undersea warfare center in Hawthorne, Nevada, hundreds of miles from the ocean. Walker Lake isn't big enough for submarines, is it?
No, absolutely not.
So what's your theory about what goes on out there?
It's a submarine base for the Navy. It's the Pacific Ocean underlies the California, Nevada, Arizona plate, and the entrance to this underground Naval Warfare Center is just north of Fort Ord in Monterey Bay. It's about 212 miles, and there's two channels the submarines use. One goes in and one goes out. And the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, I mean, there's those all over the United States, but that particular one is there because all the ammunition and the bombs and all the ordnance they use is made and stored there by the U.S. Army.
So how did they get submarines to work there? I mean, how do they get in and out?
They have an elevator that goes down 4,300 feet to sea level, and the submarines are there, and it's actually the Pacific Ocean is just below it. It's just getting down to it. Walker Lake, of course, has nothing to do with it. It's only about 15 miles long and only about 80 feet deep, maybe at the deepest, so that has nothing to do with it. But they access the Pacific Ocean through this huge elevator.
That's a wild story, John. When we come back, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you how you know about this. I know you probably can't reveal your source, but give us a general idea about it. So stick around, everyone. I'm George Knapp, and this is Coast to Coast AM. We are coming at you, Coast to Coast AM, live from Las Vegas. Our guest is John, for the next half hour, is John Lear. He's a retired airline captain, former CIA pilot, son of the famous inventor of the Lear jet. John has flown over 150 test aircraft. He's won every award granted by the FAA, holds 18 world speed records, and is the unofficial conspiracy correspondent for me on this program. We're going to be right back to ask John about a secret submarine base out here in the middle of the desert, as well as about Area 52, Bob Lazar, Element 115, and maybe torture planes. So don't go away. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm George Knapp, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Coast AM. I'm George Knapp, your guest host, and I'm joined by John Lear, the one and only. John, before we can jump back to talking about this secret submarine base, you sent me an email over the weekend saying, hey, I'll join you for the show on Sunday, but I'm going out to my mine. What's the deal on the mine?
When I retired from flying, I had this little gold mine up at Gold Butte, Nevada, and got it. It took me about 7 years to get it going, and finally got it going. Rebuilt the whole thing, and it was going there for a while. But in 2005, because there was a huge fire up there, which didn't affect my property, I forgot to file the $30 registration fee that you've got to do for a claim every year. And a few months ago, the BLM found out about it, and they said, no, you forgot to file, so you can't have your claims anymore. So it was a great operation. I spent a lot of money, but it's all over now.
Well, I don't understand. Has somebody else grabbed it from you, or they're giving it up to somebody, or they just keep it?
It's just that during the time I had it, they filed what they call ACEC, Area of Critical Environmental Concern, for 1 million acres that they're making in Clark County for a turtle habitat. And when it exempted my mine, but when I missed the filing, for the few days that I did, the mousetrap snapped shut, and there was no way to get back. Now, I appealed to the Interior Board of Appeals, Land Appeals, twice, and even went to Senator Reid, and nobody could do anything about it. So, life is a series of challenges, and it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you meet the challenge. So now I have to clean it up, and that's all there is to that. I'll press on and do other things.
Oh, man, that's a shame. Maybe you and I will talk off the air to see if I can help you in any way. Let's jump back to this discussion about the saucer, the submarine base. I drove up to your beautiful home the other day, and you and I haven't had a face-to-face chat in a while. It's a great view of Las Vegas from where you are up on the mountain there, and we started talking about all kinds of things, and it occurred to me that I have driven by this submarine base probably 100 times, and it's always been curious to me what a submarine base is doing out in the middle of the desert, an undersea warfare center. And you stopped there to sort of take some photos, right, and ran away?
Yeah, I've been driving up there for 30 years. My folks lived up in Reno, and I go back and forth, and I've seen this there and seen the sign. And, up until about 3 years ago, it was the Naval Undersea Warfare Training Center, and then they took the word training out. And, secrets... It takes a long time to put a puzzle together, and what you do is you take information from there and information from there and listen to people, and you read, and, you're not going to find this on the Internet. You have to do it by, personal contact and listen very carefully and read very carefully, and that's how I found out about it. And, I did a lot of flying, and a lot of the people I flew with were ex-military, and they always give, some little secret, and they don't know they really don't know they're doing it, but you put that together and say, okay, I got that one. But yeah, the other day I was coming back from Reno, and I just wanted to take a picture of the sign right alongside the road. It's a sign. It just says Naval Undersea Warfare Center, and I pulled over the road and pulled up my camera to the window, and just before I shot the picture, I heard a whole bunch of screaming and yelling. I looked at the little guard shack, and they're waving their arms and running over to me, so I put it in drive, and I just pulled across the road, and I said, is there a problem? And there was a lady there screaming, "You can't take pictures here. This is a secret base, and I could call the MPs and have your camera confiscated." And I said, well, I didn't mean any harm. I mean, everybody looks at this sign. I'm not taking a picture of anything inside. There's nothing to take a picture of. She says, "I don't care about that. You can't do this, and you turn right around." I said, "Well, do you think I could get a tour?" And she said, No, you can't get a tour. I drove off, but it seemed a lot of fuss. If I was running that base, I would certainly not do something like that. If somebody drove up, I'd say, "Hey, can I help you, sir? We're not giving tours today, but maybe if you write us, we'll give you tours. But sure, take a picture, a sign, whatever you want. Make it real low key there. Don't make a big fuss about it, because if you make a fuss about it, then somebody's going to wonder, what the heck is in there anyway?"
Well, yeah, it's like Area 51, the fact that everybody knew that base was out there. There'd been little newspaper articles about it for a lot of years, and it didn't really start getting interesting until they started denying that the base was out there.
Right, and you'll remember that it was 18 years ago that you released the information on Bob Lazar. And, when I go on the different forums, like AboveTopSecret.com, a lot of the people, they don't believe the Bob Lazar story. And when I look back, I don't blame them, because, you and I lived it. We were with Bob. We knew Bob. We were in his house. We saw him leave for work. We went up and saw the flying saucers fly, and it was real to us. But 18 years later, you see the story on the Internet. Hey, guy works on flying saucers for the U.S. government. They're not going to believe that.
Yeah, it's amazing how much water's under the bridge since then. We'll come back to Bob in just a second. I want to stick with the sub base for a second now. On a scale of 1 to 10, on the John Lear scale of credibility, how much do you believe, 1 being least, 10 being most?
10.
That this shaft goes 1,400 feet down into it, and people get on submarines in Hawthorne and go to the Pacific Ocean.
No doubt about it. And there's many Navy facilities around the United States. I think the United States, there's a vast undersea area. I don't know how far it goes. I suspect that there's access up in Idaho to Lake Pend Oreille, probably Coeur d'Alene, where a lot of Navy research goes. I had a friend here who was in charge of the Lake Mead Naval Air Station, or Naval Air Base here, and he told me of a secret facility in Lake Tahoe. And just today I was talking with a friend. He said, "Oh yeah, that is a real secret base." And he told me the story about Jacques Cousteau, who went down in the submarine in 1975 to see what was down there. And when he came up, they said, "What'd you see?" And he said, "The world is not ready to know what I saw." And that's on record. So,
well, why keep this secret? You said that there's more than one of these kinds of facilities all around the country, like Ohio and places like that, is what you told me when we chatted. But why keep this a secret? If you can get to a submarine and get to the ocean from down there, what's the big deal?
everything's a secret, George. Everything that the military does is a secret. You know that in the last few years I've been working on our bases on the moon. We've been on the moon since 1962. We've been on Mars since 1966. We have at least 6 space stations orbiting Earth. Next time you watch Discovery take off, it takes off on the 23rd. Just notice the time that it takes off from Kennedy and docks with a space station. It's usually about 72 hours. Now, it doesn't take that long to go up there and dock, and what they're doing is they're stopping at the other space stations, dropping off supplies. When they get to the ISS, usually a few days before, the Russians have sent 2 Progress rockets up there, and that cargo is put back onto the U.S. space shuttle, and then when they undock, guess how long it takes them to get back to Kennedy? 72 hours. Well, the trip is only 20 minutes, so they got to be doing something else, and what they're doing is they're taking those supplies that Progress brought up and going back through the line, supplying the other space stations.
Isn't there
stuff like this, going on, and it's a secret. We'll never know about it. And I'll tell you one thing. I met the other day with an Air Force intelligence guy, and my associate Ron Schmidt, and we came up in my den. We talked for several days, and at the end of this time, I said, fellas, on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 meaning we don't know anything, 100 being we know everything the government knows, where do you think we are? And our general consensus was between 0.5 and 0.7. Now, since that time, I've revised the scale to 0 to 1,000, being we still know only 0.5 to 0.7. We know nothing. Now, you mentioned St. Louis. There's a huge underground submarine testing center there, and I think they access that by going up the Mississippi.
This stuff about
all these stories I'm telling you can be found on AboveTopSecret.com. The guy posted, when I posted the original story on Hawthorne, he came on and said, my dad worked on an underground facility that was a huge body of water there in St. Louis, and he worked on nuclear submarines.
I don't have trouble believing the idea that we could have secret satellites up there or space stations. I mean, that's technically feasible. A lot of folks don't want to believe about UFOs or whatever. That is something we could do. What I don't understand is why there's no way to detect it. Shouldn't someone have access to that information to be able to say, aha, we see it up there?
No, well, yeah, you could see the space stations. There's many photos of them filmed that a guy took in Santa Monica. I think they call him Santa Monica John, and that's not me. And he had a telescope that would track satellites, and what he did is he followed them, and they're amazing satellites. I mean, and this stuff is on, you can, get it on YouTube or AboveTopSecret.com, but there's got to be at least 10 different film clips of these huge space stations, orbiting Earth.
Let's go back to Bob Lazar for a second. Have you been in touch with Bob regarding the matter I mentioned earlier, the hassle he's been getting from the government about the sale of various kinds of chemicals and scientific equipment? Yeah,
as a matter of fact, on the web ATS, the story came up with the 115 and the experiment we did, and I was trying to tell him how we did it, and I forgot what we used in the bell jar for the gamma, alpha, and beta rays, and I emailed him, and he said it was thorium oxide, and also he emailed me that I'm not sure whether it was the same CBS production, but I saw one of them that had a real good production on what he does and how science is falling behind, and it's really not falling behind. I mean, our secret government is so far ahead that people just wouldn't believe what we're doing now.
Well, just to bring the listeners up to date who may not know the story, Element 115 is what Bob Lazar claimed back in 1989 is the fuel used to power flying saucers that our government somehow acquired from some other race. And Lazar had said that he had a piece of it for a time period, and he even conducted some experiments that John Lear witnessed and which I have on videotape. And one of these days I got to find that tape for you, John.
Yeah, listen, all you guys, hear what George Knapp says? He has the videotape.
That might have been a mistake, huh? But have you been in touch with Bob about the legal difficulties he's undergoing with regard to what he sells on his company?
Yeah, he just had the court case and finished that up, and now he's being real careful. But, some of the people that post say that the stuff that he got busted for is ridiculous. Everybody uses that stuff. It's not dangerous at all.
What was the end result? Did he get punished?
Yeah, I think he got $7,500 fine and 2 years probation.
And is he not allowed to sell that stuff anymore?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they're clamping down on all that stuff.
Let's talk briefly about Area 52. I mentioned it in regard to the wild horses that died up there, but I'm also working on some stories about what goes on out at that place. The Tonopah Test Range, it's been a facility in place there for a long time, a sister facility to Area 51. What do you think is going on out there now?
Well, the real secret is the facility halfway between Tonopah and Groom Lake, and that's called Sandia. And Sandia was initially constructed between 1980 and 1987. It's a huge, huge underground base that's in what they call Area 19 on the Paiute Mesa. There's a couple of runways there. And there's also a couple of runways, I think, that are called Station 9 out in the flatlands there. And it's just an enormous operation, and they've done a good job keeping it secret. And one of the ways they've kept it secret is because everybody watches the special projects airplanes, the red and white 737s, and it's kind of hard to shuffle a couple of thousand people into a secret base without anybody knowing it. So what they did is they built these underground high-speed trains that go from Las Vegas to Sandia, and what they did is they have the entrances, if you can believe this, under 2 or 3 of the major hotels, and the workers, they just pull up into guest parking for the hotel, walk in, some nondescript door. There'll be some, elevator that only they have access to, and they go down and they get on this tram or this high-speed train that goes up to Sandia.
Got to tell you, John, I have trouble with that part of it. I have no doubt that they could have underground facilities out there, but the underground train part, I mean, for one thing, if that's true, the people of Las Vegas should really be ticked off because we could use this train technology to solve some of our woeful traffic problems.
George, since the 60s, the Navy has had a high-speed train system that goes at least nationwide and probably worldwide. And the underground tunnels that we have that people drive daily go thousands of miles. There's so much stuff going underground that nobody has a clue. And when you say you have trouble with this, remember when I brought you the Bob Lazar story, you had trouble with that. And not only that, Bob Lazar had the same problem when I initially started talking about saucers up at Area 51. He said, "This is ridiculous." He said, "I went to Los Alamos. I had a Q clearance. If that was true, I would have known it." And that's the exact words that Bob Lazar told me. And then, 4 or 5 months later, one thing led to another. He came up to my house, sat in the chair, and he said, "John," he said, "I saw a disc today." And I said, "Theirs or ours?" He said, "Theirs." And I said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Because you've taken so much crap over this, I wanted to tell you it's true."
One more question about Tonopah, though, is what is it that they're doing out there? If they've got these underground facilities and they're secretly flying in employees, what are they working on?
I don't know exactly. I think that may be where NORAD is moving. So, I don't know exactly what they're doing.
You said they've got something enough to store thousands or host thousands of troops?
Yeah, they have those 5 circular facilities, and they were digging those when Bob was here. And they go about a mile underground, and each one can hold, I think, 25,000 combat troops and their officers, and there's 5 of them. And the reason we knew is one of the guys we knew drove the dump truck, and what they do is they'd set off a clean, if you can believe it, clean nuclear bomb to make the original hole. Then they'd tunnel down there, and they'd have this road on the side of this huge hole, and they take the concrete down there and start building this entire facility. And there's 5 of those, and that's separate from the Sandia part.
Years ago, before the world knew about the stealth fighter, you and Jim Goodall and John Andrews used to go up to Tonopah, sit around outside the fence, pull out your lawn chair and watch for it, because you know, the people of Tonopah have been seeing these things flying in the sky for a long time. They kept their mouths shut. You guys found out about it, and you saw them, didn't you?
Yeah, we went out there with our lawn chairs and Diet Pepsi, and it was usually at sunset because they didn't fly during the day. And once the security guards came up and they said, "Hey, you guys can't be there," and we said, "Sure we can. This is BLM land." And the guards would come over and say, "Well, now wait a minute, we'll have to see some ID." And so we showed him our ID, and I heard him talking to his little radio phone there, and he said, "It's okay, it's only Lear and Goodall."
But I mean, it shows that secrets can and are kept.
Absolutely, positively. I mean, there are so many secrets. It's just really interesting.
I want to ask you about one other subject, if we have time to get into this. It's about torture planes. John, you flew for the CIA. You know how it works. You've read the same news accounts about torture. There's a movie that opened up this weekend called Rendition, in which these private shell companies are used by the CIA and other intelligence agencies. They go and snatch people up off the suspected terrorists up off the street, take them to hidden prisons, torture them. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't doubt it at all. You know, I've been out of the business for, I've been out of flying for 7 years, and I haven't done anything for the agency since 1983. But, that stuff goes on.
Just the idea of America being the nation of the good guys. Does it bother you? Or you think there's practical uses for that?
No, there's no practical uses. The whole war on terrorism is a scam. It never happened. It was all stuff that we did to ourselves. It doesn't exist. It's a perpetuation